My name is Brock Arnason. I'm the founder and CEO of Droit. I have with me here my colleague William Kolkey, who runs our knowledge engineering team. The topic of the presentation today is treating the law as data. And I hope that by the end of the presentation, you'll see that, in fact, you can treat the law as data, and you can use it to make real-time decisions on financial transactions. And this has some very interesting implications in the digital asset space. So we focus on what you would call computational law and automated decision making. We see the complexity of rules and regulations as an opportunity to take better action and an opportunity to be able to tap into a consensus implementation that is vetted with industry leaders that you can use to take decisions within your own firm as a regulated entity. Just very briefly, we are primarily used by what you would characterize as GSIBs and large financial institutions to take a variety of decisions in real time, both pre-trade, before transactions are executed, and post-trade to determine obligations such as reporting obligations. So we're used by these firms globally for over 250 of what we would call mandates, which are essentially regulatory areas of interest, such as 17 CFR Part 45 for reporting, a variety of other things. And we're used for hundreds of millions of decisions as they occur in real time. We have an anchor in New York, but we also have presence in London and a variety of other places around the world. So the way that we think about the process of treating the law as data is, first you must conceive of the law as text. You want to take that text as it changes and create a data product from it, so that you can look at versions of the text. Then you want to annotate that text and mark connections between that text and logic. That logic would determine whether a particular transaction is subject to that rule, to that law. So we build consensus by engaging with market participants on interpretation. We codify a representation of that logic and we tie it to the underlying text. This manifests in three different components. You have something called a digital library that allows you to see regulatory text, versions of it, and look at comparisons. You have a logic viewer that allows you to visualize that logic as a decision tree. And you have a decision engine that allows you to take decisions and create proofs that you can use, if audited, to evidence that you have followed a certain version of the law. We do this for a variety of different regulatory spaces and use cases, but the way to think about it is fundamentally they fall into pre-trade controls, preventative controls before you execute a transaction, and post-trade reporting use cases. Now, if you think about where in the transaction life cycle this makes sense, you start with what we would call client readiness, which is KYC, due diligence, the concept of can this particular client or can this particular counterparty do this transaction in a compliant fashion. So you don't have a trade yet, but you are prospecting, you are creating the opportunity to do a trade. Then when you actually are pricing and looking to execute, you have rules like clearing controls, right? Is this something that has to be executed on a competitive electronic venue? You have sanctions controls, do not trade lists, booking controls, and then these point of trade controls that often include business conduct rules, investor disclosures. Can I trade, can I not? Once a transaction has been executed, you have an obligation to report that transaction under various different rules. That report has a certain format and a construct. Is that something I can generate? How is it generated? Is it going to be accepted by the regulator? Now, the unique element of digital assets is that you have a chain, right? A blockchain. What you can do is when we normally have clients evaluate rules and generate a proof, evidentiary documentation that they have followed a version of the law, they store that internally and make that accessible to auditors. You can actually store that on chain for digital assets. And that opens up a variety of interesting opportunities where you can look at a proof and then you can assume that that proof allows you to interact with the client in a certain way, gives you confidence that those rules have been followed. At this point, I'm going to hand over to my colleague who will actually demonstrate how that would work in practice.
Yeah, thank you, Brock. So something that Brock emphasized is that it's not enough to codify law. You want to do so in a way that is auditable and transparent. And we're going to show how we do that on the Adept platform for the CFTC SEC rule for classifying a derivative as a CFTC regulated swap, SEC regulated security-based swap, co-regulated mixed swap, or not a derivative at all. And this is used by large financial institutions to comply with CFTC SEC rules, and that includes institutions that trade in digital assets, because of course you can have derivatives on digital assets and they would be equally subject to Dodd-Frank. So here you can see how the software visualizes the rule. We ask a series of questions about the instrument. Here it's asking about the asset class. Is it a commodity derivative? Is it a credit derivative, equity derivative, etc.? And depending on that classification, you arrive at decision trees that are specific to the classification, asking ever more granular questions. And then depending on the branch that you traverse, additional questions may apply. So the way that clients interact with this is by constructing an input message. That is a message that uses a structured data model, and it answers various questions about the product that you are trading. So in this case, what is the asset class? We thought about the decision tree. What's the base product? Is the instrument cash settled or physically settled, etc. So you input information about the transaction using that structured data model. Here we click submit, and then we get a decision from the Adept platform. And here we represented a cash settled equity forward, and the software is saying that this is a security-based swap. And we can look at the decision trace to understand how that decision was specifically reached. So here we're using the ISDA taxonomy to classify the instrument. As noted, this is an equity derivative. And here we have this cash settled equity forward. It is a single name cash settled equity forward. It doesn't have compo FX features. And for that reason, it is classified as a security-based swap. So sure enough, right, if we update one of the informational elements that describe that product, and here let's update that last element, and we're going to provide that it does have a compo FX feature, meaning that our cash settled equity forward is going to be referencing a foreign security. And so the performance of the swap is going to be influenced in part by the difference in foreign currency exchange rate. We're going to resubmit and see how that influences the software decision. And here we can see that now the software has classified the instrument as a mixed swap. And we can validate the reason why by, again, traversing that decision tree. And then here we see that final node, it was evaluating to false. We changed the input message, it now evaluates to true. And that brings us here to the classification of mixed swap. Now, one form of auditability, right, is just seeing this decision trace and seeing the various nodes that are traversed to arrive at the decision. But you also want to validate, right, that the logic is representing accurately the underlying text. And so each of these nodes is going to be connected to the specific rule, the regulatory text that explains why that node is in place. So here, for the node that asks, does the product have a compo FX feature? We can click this link, and this opens up what we call the digital library. And this is the sort of database of texts that underlie our regulatory software. And it's going to take us to the specific pin site in that text that explains that implemented logic. And so here we can see is actually a footnote, footnote 657 of the CFTC SEC rule for classifying derivatives. And this footnote explains that a combo equity swap is going to be a mixed swap. And again, it's because of that foreign currency exposure. Traditionally, the CFTC regulates foreign exchange derivatives. So this is also what you would expect, right? The foreign exchange element brings in the CFTC, while the equity forward on a sort of single name instrument element is going to subject the instrument to SEC rules. The value of this auditability is twofold. First, you can verify that the model accurately reflects the text, but also when rules change, and that can include through a formal amendment or through updated regulator guidance, this visualization can make very clear how that change might impact the evaluation of a financial transaction. So there you have it, our software for classifying OTC derivatives. We imagine, should the Clarity Act pass, that similar software can be implemented to classify digital asset as a CFTC, SEC, or co-regulated instrument.
Thank you for your time.